Sifu by Slow Clap Games is a third-person martial arts beat-em-up where you play a mystical kung fu master who dies only to come back again, stronger, again and again and again and again. As a wise master once said, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Let's see which one Sifu does. Subscribe if you like the videos. Also, the first 2,000 people who like and subscribe to the channel, as well as leaving a comment, will have good luck for the rest of the year. So graphically, Sifu opens up prior to the main game as you play out a tutorial, learning the basics and picking up bits of the story about why you're on this almost undying path of revenge. That rough-hewn, carved-out-of-crayons look to everything is a bit Telltale Games and a whole lot of style. It works incredibly well when the credits start rolling at this interlude and after the tutorial and your character's performing their kata and also taking down his future enemies in his childhood dreams as he learns all the skills that he's going to need. It's crazy to see the level of animation play out here as well. Most of the time, the big bold strokes kind of art, I think, leaves everyone looking a bit like they're in the middle of the world's biggest protein dump, and they're either seeing their life pass before their eyes or straining continuously. But not Sifu. As enemies rally around you and beside you and behind you, you can see the character's eyes flip back and forth, following them until they leave his peripheral vision. A small but noticeable graphical tell that merges with the incredible animations to make it feel like you're really there, like this really is a martial arts movie you're watching and controlling. Animations are excellent, from neon-soaked rockers wearing Dr. Dre beats to masters with strangely powerful green thumbs. Every enemy, every movement is just insanely well done here. Sometimes the graphics even shifts to a 2D, the raid hallway type of movie battle scene with you going out and performing your moves there as well. I like the look, I like the way it is recorded and drawn. Everything just sings. The only thing I would say is sort of a hit against this game is that some of the locations are a little bit drab when you start really investigating them. Performance-wise, though, the game does excellent. While it does have DLSS, a lot of people aren't probably going to have to use it. There's other options as well to adjust if you need a couple FPS back. Now, I did see some stutters later on in the 4th and 5th location, but those went away on a reload. It's rock solid for the most part. All my fights, even with everything on Ultra and using the 1080 Ti at 1080p and 1440p with a couple settings down. The 3080 was well above 60 at 4K at all times. And while you might look at this game and say, well, technically that sort of makes sense, artistically, it punches above its weight. Many games do look tremendous, a display of the artist's ability to translate their mind's eye to the screen, but often they come across a bit clinical, free of any real atmosphere, and there are some places like that in Sifu where the locations seem hell-bent on making sure you know a battle is actually coming up. But then you'll walk into a hallway bathed in darkness, and up in front of you, the shadow of an enemy flashes by, and now you're moving through these unique spaces and altered places, always questioning if something is more mystical occurring than just your inability to die. Graphically, I love the look of the game.
You were not supposed to be part of tonight's crew.
Audio-wise, it's more hits than misses, but there are a couple things here I want to talk about. First, Howie Lee, the composer, who's never worked on a game before, initially didn't seem to go too far from the expected when I was first listening to this, but as you play out, there's some exceptional pieces that start to get offered. The darker elements of the story are also noted out in some particular moments in the tracks, like this initial opening, to the later pieces, like a dance club with the instruments distorted to offer a leaden dark edge to that actual music section. His use of effects over the top of the traditional instruments very much helps. Depressed gongs sound almost demonic and spiritual at the same time. And even the instruments that are played in the menus, which when you switch between the different tabs, you can hear the tight dragon drum beat in there. It works to sort of solidify everything as one piece. And sound effects and the samplings are also done well. They're surprisingly good, in fact. It's wide open when it needs to be, like fights in large cave-style locations or huge rooms and drug dens, as well as that ability for it to tighten down and focus and become almost edgy when you enter a small room with two dudes who are just sleeping, so you decide, hey, I'm going to kick the shit out of these guys. Now, one place I did find the game sorely lacking is voices. Overall, they just don't have any real gravitas, any sort of feeling to them or layering that I expected. In fact, many times the main character is very hard to hear, not really mixed well with the rest of the accompaniment. And while your character doesn't say much, when he does, it's pretty generic. Less so for the enemies, though. There's something powerful that plays out when you die and you come back to life, and you can hear the enemies literally freak out as you're rising from the ground. I loved that feeling of power. Even if you just got your ass kicked in the fight, their shock at seeing you stand up, wipe the dirt off, and go again, it pays off every single time. I really would have liked, though, more gravitas, more feeling to the main enemies and that main player. Because while the normal enemies are fine and while the sound effects when you're fighting are fine and the music is fine, it just wasn't held up with the voiceovers. As a package, I'd say pretty good with a couple misses there. When it comes to gameplay, in many ways, Sifu feels like a mini Soulsborne style of game, which is exactly what they were actually aiming for. Somewhat both familiar and unique at the same time. It combines difficulty with in-place enemy power-ups and an aging system that really does not feel like almost anything else exactly like it. Each time you die, you age and you come back stronger, like age masters in martial arts movies just hanging out and punching waterfalls back into rivers. Buying special moves or extra health bars or max bars for your other different energy types and other upgrades are these temporary bonuses unless you spend a ton of XP to unlock those as permanent ones for that particular career. And it's a tight race almost the entire time. Buy now to have those moves and abilities, or buy later and have a couple be permanent for that career if you have to start over. After you complete that original tutorial I talked about, you find yourself in Sifu's home. CSI crime board on one corner, wooden dummy for practicing in another, and just a couple things here. It's instantly informing of what this character's about to the gamer. This guy's entire mission is revenge. As you uncover secrets and details about locations, each picture, item, or trinket you find is added to the crime board, letting you piece together the reasons why the tragedy that's happened at the starting actually occurred. When you're ready to leap out and take on your mission, all you do is walk to the huge window overlooking the city, and you begin. To control Sifu, use the analog stick for movement and the triggers, bumpers, and buttons for dodges, parries, and attacks in that order. You can remap the buttons if you're not a fan of having parries and dodges on the bumpers or triggers. Fighting in Sifu is a mixture with light and heavy buttons and their basic attacks and combos, attacks you can unlock with experience points, and a judicious amount of dodge and parry button pressing. Parry perfectly and you stun the enemy, dodge perfectly and you're most likely out of range, but also out of range for doing any damage against that enemy unless assorted bottles, pipes, and other items are around and you got that skill to kick them at them, or you pick them up and throw them at them. Enemy groups are usually made up of just a couple thugs and some tougher enemies. However, this is one of the first games I've seen that has an ingenious, if just downright really crushing mechanic. In some groups, if you don't take out some characters in just the right way and they fight off your finishing move, they turn into basically a mini sub-boss. Yellow fire lighten their hair on fire like an anime character, and they become incredibly hard-hitting, and they can turn a fight with a couple pretty easy to defeat enemies into a friggin' game of Sifu bumper cars, where these dudes are just blasting you between the two of them. I like the mix, I like the idea, but I'm not gonna lie, as I will talk about in a second, there are times when the game can make that feel crushingly difficult. But you can lessen any difficulty in this game by just being smart and using the world to your benefit. The game's movement, when combining the jukes and the parries as well as dodging, allows for a larger assortment of player strategies than the game initially sort of suggests to you. Some of the more claustrophobic areas, they stay dangerous, but others can offer unique advantages, such as a way to sneak past large groups of enemies, or the ability to come in from one side of a room versus the other. Always keep an eye out for things in the game world that you can open or windows you can climb through, and alternative ways that you can move. There's even some spots here where you don't have to fight somebody. I won't get into it, I'm not going to spoiler it, but it's very cool. Like many games of this sort, shortcuts can be the life breath of a second chance without showing up already beaten half to death. You're consistently watching your health and focus and structure, or your stance. While you can just block many attacks, each one of those breaks down that structure by just a little bit until hits start working their way through. Now, during the game, you're going to find small shrines as well. These are where you can spend points to raise the amount of focus, the structure, health, and you can also take down enemies with new moves by buying them here. There's a ton of different moves. You can either buy them temporarily, basically for that playthrough, that life, or those lives, or you can buy them permanently. But one place that the game can let you down a little bit is that it has a couple moves tracked to the up and down on the analog stick. But if you're fighting heading diagonal one way, it can be a bit cumbersome using them in the analog fashion. It's just a little bit slower than the digital pad would have been. And that bit of clumsiness is added to by a camera that for the most part works well. See, the collision detection is pretty good in the game overall, but it's just loose enough that when you're in a large battle and the camera also decides to lose its shit, like the cameraman's worried about his own safety and leaping away, you can end up really feeling feeling like you lost or got hit because of the game versus your own mistake. Picking up weapons along the way like bats and batons and all kinds of pipes and staves will help you defeat those enemies quicker. You absolutely have to do a lot of crowd control in this game. If the game has any other real oddities, it's that some of the enemies are pretty invulnerable to some attacks, like the sweep, though you can power that up. Otherwise, a number of them are sort of impervious to it, and that works against that feeling of flexibility in what you want to buy. It sort of forces your hand in the upgrade path. Now, you don't have to do that, but it will make those characters in particular places quite a bit more difficult if you can't, say, sweep them to slow them down a little bit. I would have liked more of a dodging for that for those characters than them just soaking it without any real hesitation. What I would suggest is you use the game's special focus moves, which are the real martial arts style moves, eye pokes, kicking in the balls, all kinds of crazy stuff, insanely powerful iron palm strikes. You probably will want to use those moves on those enemies, and if you get better combos, that raises, of course. And the balancing act between that trinity of age, power, as well as the skills you have bought versus skills that may not be useful in a particular area or are really needed but you don't have, is some of the mastery that's available in this game. It also does hold it back a little bit. A little bit of that flexibility can feel lost. But does that loss of flexibility affect the fun factor and what works? At its best, Sifu is phenomenal, old school mixed with current gameplay mechanics and wickedly interesting upgrade curves. It means your gameplay style is actually going to change every single time you die. When you're in the flow and the camera isn't losing its mind, the game feels just like a martial arts movie in game form. Special finishing moves are intelligent. If you're near something, the game might smash an enemy's head into a wall or maybe just leap into the air and knee them hard enough that their head flies past their friends. The feeling of power, flexibility, and movement and dexterity there is pretty much one of a kind, until it's not. And here's where the game can be a little bit odd. A good run can turn into a terrible starting, because if you use up all your lives, you end up starting over. You have that higher age, but you at least get to choose the level that you want to go to, any that you've unlocked. And you'll have all of the permanent unlocks as well, still provided. But it's an odd trade-off that can result in a restart not feeling really the same way at all as the gameplay did at the moment of death. So be aware of that. The game's use of shortcuts and other odds and ends and exploration really helps replayability immensely. I would have loved the ability to skip the prologue and the tutorial completely, since I did start over a couple times with a new career. But that's sort of small beans. This is a game that doesn't necessarily go out there to make you feel comfortable, and I think the replayability, as long as you're aware of it, is fine. And the feeling of that is fine. You just have to really understand what they're doing. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating scale. For $40, which is the normal digital price of this game, I actually think this is worth it. I will tell you right up front that this game is slightly different. In many ways, Sekiro reminds me of this in the way that Sekiro went away a little bit from the Dark Souls style and also had the ability for you to break people's stances and stuff like that. That's sort of what happens here. It's another curve on top of multiple other curves. Just be aware, always use the locations for your own defense, and I think you will really enjoy Sifu. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. No matter what, February's here. Check out the channel. Subscribe. There's going to be a ton more reviews coming out, a ton of videos. I hope you guys go out and get this and enjoy it if you do. If you don't, tell me what you're getting in the comments section. Peace out.